Hello, and welcome to Total Training's Adobe Photoshop CS5 Extended Essentials series. I'm Amadou Diallo. I'm a photographer, author, educator, and digital imaging consultant. But most importantly, I'm your guide to the wonderful world of Photoshop. In this series, we're going to explore the essential tools, techniques, and workflow that lead to successful Photoshop results. Make no mistake, just because this is an essential series doesn't mean that we have to settle for bland, boring work. I'm going to show you how to use Photoshop like the pros do. We've got a lot to look forward to over the next few hours. At the end of this training, people will be asking you for Photoshop advice. Let's get started by understanding some of the basic principles of digital images and explore Photoshop's interface. Before we jump into the nitty-gritty of Photoshop, it's important to understand a few of the basic principles behind what the program does and how it works. Photoshop is a raster-based editing program that works with pixels. If you're completely new to Photoshop, your first question may be, well, what's a pixel? I can explain this much better with an image on screen, so I'm going to take this opportunity to open up a file. And you can do the same thing. Throughout this training series, you can open up the identical files that I've got here on your computer. Simply refer to your Project Files folder, and inside that folder is going to be a separate folder for each chapter. So here I'll go to File, Open, and I'm going to go to the Chapter 1 folder. Inside that folder, I've got a file called Fuji High Res. I'll click on that, go down, and hit the Open button. Now this may appear as a continuous tone image with smooth, seamless transitions between colors and tones and highlights and shadows. But if we zoom in, and we'll cover zooming in an upcoming lesson, but for right now, I'll just give you the shortcut of Command plus for the Mac, Control plus for the PC, and I'll just do that repeatedly. If we keep zooming in, and I mean really, really zoom in, all the way up to 3200%, we can see that this image is actually made up of tiny individual squares. You can see them outlined here in this grid, and each of these tiny individual squares is, well, you guessed it, a pixel. If you don't see a grid overlay on your screen, it may be that your video card doesn't support this feature. In any event, however, you'll still be able to see the outlines of individual pixels at this high magnification level. So pixels are the building blocks, the fundamental building blocks of every image that we're going to be looking at in Photoshop. Pixels also have a fixed size. You cannot take a pixel and make it bigger. You cannot take a pixel and make it smaller. You can add pixels to an image, and you can take pixels out of an image, but they remain a constant fixed size. Notice also that in the pixels here, you can see that each one has a slightly different color. You can see some have a little more of a cyan or blue, some have a little more magenta, some veer a little bit towards purple, and taken as a whole, these individual discrete colors combine to form our continuous tone image. So if I zoom back out, again on the Mac I'll do Command minus, on the PC Control minus. If I zoom back out to a more reasonable viewing level, we can see that grid of individual and distinct pixels forms a smooth continuous tone image. Now pixels are also very important because they determine the resolution of an image. And to find out more about that, we're going to take a look at the image menu. So I'm going to go up here to Image, Image Size, and let's find out some information about this image. Here at the top under Pixel Dimensions, you can see we've got a width of 1600 pixels and a height of 1218 pixels. So left to right, 1600 pixels, top to bottom, 1218. That combination of pixels gives us a file size under Pixel Dimensions at the top of 5.58 megabytes. So that's how big a file is, and the file size is determined by the number of pixels in the image. I'm going to press return just to invoke the OK button. So in this image, you can see with that amount of pixels, and we're viewing it now at 100% or at actual size, the image spills out beyond the constraints of our document window. Even if I scroll around here, we can see that it's impossible to fit the entire image within the small area of our document window. By the way, I'm holding down the space bar on the keyboard while I click and drag to move this image around. That temporarily activates the hand tool. Let's contrast that with another image. I'm going to go back up to File, Open, back into our Chapter 1 folder. This time I'm going to select Fuji Low Res. I'll just hit the Open button with the return key. Now, same image, shot of Mount Fuji, early morning, but let's go up to the image menu and see what is different about this file. So we go to image, image size. Now a much different set of numbers. Our width is 500 pixels and our height is only 381 pixels, giving us a file size under pixel dimensions of 558.1 kilobytes, not megabytes, but kilobytes. I'm going to invoke the OK button by hitting the return key. So we have a much smaller image now. This image has less resolution. It has 500 pixels left to right versus 1600 pixels in the previous image. So this image right now is actually at 100%, and you can see that our view is much smaller than we had in the prior image. Now you might ask, well, why can't we just zoom in like you did before? We'll do Command plus on the Mac, Control plus on the PC, and zoom into an identical size or a reasonably similar size to what we had before. Let's try that. But if I scroll in, we're zoomed in at 400%, you can see the image quality. Very important. They're the fundamental building blocks of our image, and they determine by their sheer number the size of the file, how much space that's going to take up on your hard drive, and how big we can view that image on screen. In Lesson 1, we noted that each individual pixel in our image had a separate color. Your computer understands and talks about color in a much different way than we humans do. Photoshop doesn't know reds or blues, for example. It knows color values. In our case, RGB values, a set of 3 numbers describing how the 3 primaries of red, green, and blue are combined. From just these 3 primaries, we can create literally millions of distinct colors. So what do these numbers actually mean? To find out, let's open an image. We're going to go up to File, Open, and in my Project Files folder, in the Chapter 1 folder, I'm going to select the image titled Garden, and on the keyboard I'll press the Return key to invoke the Open button. Now in Lesson 3, we're going to talk about workspaces and panels, so don't worry if your screen doesn't look exactly like mine does at this point. But what I do need you to have is the Info panel available. I'm going to click on mine here on this tab, and that's the Info panel. If you do not see this on your screen, I want you to go up to the Window menu, scroll down until you see the word Info, and select it. That will pop up the Info panel on your screen. Once the Info panel is up, I want you to pay close attention to this left quadrant of the panel where we have spaces for RGB numbers. Now watch what happens as I move the mouse over the image area. Notice that those numbers are populated and they're also continuously updating as I move the mouse. Now these numbers represent the individual red, green, and blue components of the pixel located directly beneath where my mouse is located. So as I move the mouse and it's over a different pixel, I will see a different set of RGB numbers. Now Photoshop's color numbering system works on a scale of 0 to 255, with 0 being no color and 255 equaling maximum color. So as I hover the mouse over this blue area in the sky, we can see that at this pixel I have a red value of 96, a green of 124, and a blue of 172. Of those 3 primaries, blue is at a higher strength or intensity. It's at a level of 172 versus where the red channel is. Now if I move down here to a warmer part of the image, we can see that it's somewhat reversed. Now the red component of that pixel is at the highest intensity compared to the green and the blue. And this is very important because Photoshop works with numbers. We might think in colors, but Photoshop is doing math and working with numbers. Now let's take a closer look at how these numbers relate to each other. I'm going to move over here to the Tools panel, and at the bottom I'm going to just double click on the foreground color to bring up our color picker. This is going to be a great way to see exactly how Photoshop mixes colors together. Notice down in here I've got our old friends, the R, G, and B values. We said that 0 means no color and 255 means maximum color. If I have my red at 0, my green at 0, and my blue at 0, the color I have up here is black. If I set my red at 255, my green at 255, and my blue at 255, they're all at maximum color, and that, in this color model, equals white. So watch what happens if I have red at 255 and I turn off green, put that to 0, turn off blue, put that to 0. Now I've got a pure red color. By the same token, if I turn my red off to 0 and turn my green on to 255 with the blue at 0, I now have a maximum pure green color. So you can see that there's literally millions of combinations you could have here. Each one of these red, green, and blue values can be anywhere from 0 to 255. Right in the middle, obviously, would be about 128 or 127, depending on how you like to do your math. If I set all of these, the red to 128, the green to 128, and the blue to 128, I now have a neutral mid-tone gray. So the combination of these red, green, and blue values are how Photoshop mixes its entire bucket of colors. With some of the basic theory behind us, let's take a close look at Photoshop's interface. This will be our neighborhood over the next 6+ hours, so let's get the lay of the land. Now before we do that, I'd like to open up an image. There's a couple things we're going to talk about that'll make a little more sense if we can see an image on screen. So we're going to go to File, Open, and in the Project Files folder, in the Chapter 1 folder, let's choose our old friend Garden and open that up on the screen. Now in this lesson, it's imperative that your screen look exactly the way mine does. So what I want you to do is go up to the Window menu. Under Workspace, I want you to select Essentials. This is the default that Photoshop ships with, so you may be here already, but if not, if this does not have a check mark to it, simply select it. Once you do that, you should be looking at the same thing that I've got. Now, if you've been playing around with the Essentials workspace and it looks a little bit different, what I'd like for you to do is go up in the Applications bar. I want you to put your mouse over the name Essentials. It should be highlighted. On the Mac, I want you to control-click. On the PC, I want you to right-click. And I want you to choose Reset Essentials. That'll take the Essentials workspace all the way back to the factory defaults. So now we should be looking at the same thing on screen. Now, at the beginning of your Photoshop experience, the place you're going to spend probably the most amount of your time